at automation, control without contacts, and remote monitoring, remote execution, remote order fulfillment, all these things, which have kind of pressed a fast forward button towards automation. Correct? No? Automation of not the simple order, not the low cost automation I'm talking about. I'm talking about total automation of things where men are not required anymore. You know, so we are entering into a new regime of Industry 4.0, and the term 3D printing, as we understood from Professor, is not about one technology but many of them, which create objects without any tools and without any cutting tools, for example. Any shaping in a mold is not required. And because of this, people have to design uh, various subsystems which will deliver such a promise. And today, 3D printing, as we can see, is a term, or additive manufacturing is a term referred to so many technologies that do the same thing in a different ways. Uh, we have material like liquid material going into making things, powder material going into making things, filament material making things, lamination or sheet like thing, which are useful to make things. And you also have glue and powder to put them together. And you also have material paste, or direct material which are getting deposited, and also energy like plasma or high power laser or electron beam being used to direct the flow of metal or material in order to create things. In a way, they all have a commonality. They derive their input from a digital data, right? And they also have a commonality of additiveness, and that's where it stops. Everything else is different. The energy levels, the material input, the way they're controlled, they're all different, right? But still we call it as additive manufacturing or 3D printing, just like this elephant explored by blind people. In fact, I'll not go into the details of the various technologies, but as an industry practitioner, what I've seen is the capabilities what Chuck Hull built in 1986 through his photopolymerization, okay, was definitely a seminal contribution. So much so that this technology, even today, is a very, very important technology. One can reckon with, because the accuracy is built. Because here the laser was drawing something, and laser, when it is looking at the 2D, resolution is very high. So this helped people to actually create mock-up models and all very accurately. And beyond that, there is no application. So Dr. Kodama called it as rapid prototype, while the term was also adopted by Chuck Hull when the photopolymerization became popular in the 80s and 90s. But many people joined the bandwagon. They thought differently, and so many new technologies came. And even today, it is going on. I'll not be surprised. Many of you in the audience would be working on your own new technology, or making the same way, but in a different way. That is the creativity. Creativity is about not making different things, but making things differently. That's very important. And I'm sure these technologies, what we have, will have more and more. We can classify them as generation one, generation two, generation three technology. Just like you have now 4G, 5G, 6G. Technologies. They always show us the way, and this can probably, whatever we discussed today, it may become invalid after some time. That is the nature of technology. What we hold good today, it may not be able to tomorrow. And so, what was in 86, the mock-up models and all, the capability was, you cannot measure them. They're not consistent, and all that in the early days. But when the layer thickness became fine, people were able to actually make accurate models. That means it gave feedback. If you have a design and you want to validate a design, you need to have a prototype which is made accurately as per the dimensions. And that was possible, in the 2010, 2005 to 2010. That's what the journey was, and people were able to actually create. So these became a kind of a validation tool. Prototype, fine, but beyond prototype, these things can be put on a vehicle and you test it for, test run it. It gives you a feedback as to how it is functioning. So design which is getting tested, validation, you know. So that's where I call it as design validation model. And that was the period. And today we are speaking of a regime wherein we are looking at end user application. You know, that means a design validation tool, a prototype, well, everything is done. And I can also use it for my end use. That means it is going to be capable of withstanding the hardships of the working environment of the part or the component in its use context. You know, and in a way, uh, a product will have a life cycle. You purchase it, you use it, and then you finally retire it because the new technology comes and takes over, or it breaks down, right? So product life cycle also it should fulfill. This end user part means it has to, uh, of course, the life cycle itself is once upon a time a car life cycle was lifetime. Model T and all people used to keep 100s, Of course, it is only 100 years old or maybe a little bit more, but people used to keep it. But today, take the example of a smartphone. What is the life cycle? Probably for me, it is 2 years, 3 years. But youngsters, like all of you, it would be probably 6 months to 1 year. That means even the cars now, how long people use? Maybe for 1 year, 2 years. Then a new version comes, people buy it. You know, that means the product life cycle itself is coming down. Now, the capability of 3D printing for the last 35 years has changed. And today, we are making a lot of things which are end user, uh, uh, application they actually provide. But when it comes to end user application, does it get any rebate because it is 3D printed? No, you don't get any rebate because if a part has to perform, it has to perform, right? Many times they will ask, 3D printing means, okay, will it be 50% strong, 80% strong, or it's okay? What is factor of safety and all? My stance is always it has to perform, it has to deliver the whatever required. So conventional test has to be done on anything 3D printed also, because you are working with the same real world. It is the same use context, and there is no rebate there. There is no rebate for your life. If there is a risk, there is a risk. So people are trying to look at the risk factors for the new technology, because new technology is only 35 years old, while the conventional technology is almost 200 years old. Correct. Now, over the years, it has got so many things established. So it becomes a little a challenging thing to convince people, yes, it works, you use it. It can be only best demonstrated by testing it, right? And, with the advent of all technology arrival, patent got patents were given, and now it's 34 years. Patent is only valid for 20 years. So technologies became open source, you know, and open source technologies, what they do is anybody can build it, right? Any people can actually have access to technology and they can put together things. And this actually helped people to build, not only build, uh, also to tinker. When you tinker, what happens? You come out with new configurations, right? For example, the inventor of FDM technology, Stratasys, had Cartesian, and for a long time they did not innovate, invent and innovate. Both they did not do much. They were in a kind of you may know, Stratasys was actually founded by a parent who was trying to fix a toy, right? It is a husband and wife team. Later on, it became a company and all. So it was not driven by an endeavor to invent, innovate, and bring value, things like that. They were triggered by a different purpose altogether. Somewhere, they lacked this drive. And when it came to the open source, people have started adding onto it. They brought so many things from Cartesian, you got Delta, Polar, Scara, and many more. Today there are many things. There is a printer called Raise, which prints color FDM. It has got a color head, print head. It can, no matter what color, it will print because it's a white filament, and as it gets deposited, depending on the color data which is fed to the processor, it can actually print that color. So some of these, but many times when these things happen in open source teams, the makers, the tinkerers, they don't have so much of funding, nor they have interest to go deep into it. You know, so many times these technologies are not very very reliable. Many small systems, we see they're low cost, but they don't really mm, stand the test of the time. It may work today, tomorrow it may not work, kind of reliability issues you have. But nevertheless, desktops are arriving in all kinds of think of a filament one, or you think of liquid based, you think of powder based, or you think of even metal based. Today a lot of companies are coming out with such desktop or small volume uh, production replicas of the older technologies. Whatever we saw, the technologies which are patented because the expiry of patent have given rise to such a thing. But in all this, it will be a great time to do research, getting to these smaller systems to see how it works and what are the parameters and how I can extend it further. As we saw earlier, this is going to further, trigger new developments in terms of material, in terms of technology, in terms of capability. And because of low volume, it is also cheaper. People can afford to use it as a first step to adopt. So even industry would be looking at these kind of things. That is something which is a great opportunity now. And in fact, people have come out with a dual, nozzles for tandem printing. Either it can be used for support, which is breakaway support, or you can have two colors which are there. In fact, anything which is by material or by metal, you can build in smartness also. So this particular FDM thing would be very suitable for making smart um, um, things like 4D printing, what they call, having two different materials at different parts of the part, which kind of responds to a stimulus, be it heat, vibration, light, whatever. So people are really finding it good presently, looking at the technologies which are there. In fact, there are few companies are building a reliable system, though it is desktop, and that's where industries are looking at really. We cannot, everyone cannot afford a very, very costly, highly reliable system, which is high performance and it can have all kinds of things like 4.0, 4.0 ready, things like that. When you look at low cost, they may work today, tomorrow they may not work. So the choice of industry is looking at reliable systems. Why industry? Even the institutes today, research labs also. I need to have a standard against which I'm going to have a variable, two systems wherein I can play around with one and one I can keep it as a standard. For research also it is required. Reliability also reflects the repeatability. You know, so in research also we look at repeatability. Repeatability has been a great issue in metal additive manufacturing. Plastics, it is there, but people are not so much worried. But in metal, where the service expectations are high, repeatability becomes a important thing because industry is used to Six Sigma. You know, I don't know what is Sigma for me because we don't. I mean, we cannot afford to reject anything. So whatever comes in and it goes out. So it's like 100%. It is beyond Six Sigma, right? But actually, if you look at it, is not. So there is a lot of things which people don't even report when you're making one piece, one off. How can you describe a Six Sigma there? When you have just one, every time you make one of things. Well, today we have a whole range of things like this particular company, Form Labs, which has come out with reasonably good, repeatable, reliable systems, which are really becoming very good. And a company which actually made aircrafts, looking at the technology, evaluating technology, and bringing technology to board, uh, they are the people who know it. You know. For example, if Imaginium were to sell a technology, we are the users of technology first. Same way, GE is putting it's taking risk. It developed the so-called the leak pigeon nozzle, and 18 or 19 of them. They built about 10,000 and more, 1 lakh pieces recently, to validate it. That means they have so much of data by which they know exactly how it behaves. This is the confidence, additive manufacturing is giving, it is gaining. And some of the systems, what they evaluated for their own needs, they are now offering. For example, the metal lab, research lab, which they are offering, has various things which are open, and you can have your own material, feedstock, you can have your own parameter, and also you have something which is for production where it is all locked, and so you don't have to worry about anything. In industry, there is a certain amount of de-skilling happens. I cannot afford to keep a PhD to run a mission. Whereas in research lab, where you are actually synthesizing, that's where we need people who have, masters and terminal degrees. They're able to understand, push the boundaries of knowledge. So research lab missions are particularly suited for research, where I want to bring a standardization, or I want to convert a part item to additive manufactured item. So how do I go about it? So without actually investing a whole lot of money on a production system, because production system is built for 25 by 24 by 7, 365 days working type of thing. But you don't feed it, so you don't require such a large volume white elephant. So what you need is a small one. And so luckily today opportunity is for industry, they can go for a large mission if it is good for them. They can also start with a small one. That is the opportunity what I have today. And we also have many systems which are now Industry 4.0 ready. That means with a lot of sensors and all embedded into the so-called additive manufacturing systems, people are able to do a diagnostics, they're able to do a remote monitoring, they're able to do a in situ, quality control also. Such things are becoming really important. While OEMs are busy working on the technology, industry is ready for making large scale and making money. Who has to do the research? And this is where I think industry, academia, OEM partnership collaborations will come into play. So a lot of the efforts which are happening in the industry 4.0 with respect to additive manufacturing is largely between the universities and the OEMs, or it could be also a user partner industry. They come together and they form a kind of a consortium where they take it forward. That is a great opportunity. So we are still talking about the opportunity now. And well, literally, GE has made the Metal AM fly because of the capabilities they are building. And we have to believe them because, after all, they know the flying these metal birds better than us. And today, the 3D printing technology itself has so many avatars. Industry has on one side opportunity to select, choose anything from whatever available. They also have a challenge that what is good for me. You know, there is a certain amount of ambiguity and wariness because every company says you buy mine. That is best for you. Because they want to sell. The technology creators want to sell and make money, while industry is also a little bit suspicious as to what OEMs are telling, you know, which is good for me. So it becomes a kind of very important thing. When we have the opportunity on one side, the challenge is how to have kind of a adoption, um, um, go to market, something like go to market, how to go to industry with a case by which they can adopt the technology. So this has opened up a new area, which is open to not only OEMs and industry, but also to the educational institutions. They can actually take up such bridging, just like how FTP is done, it is required for industry also. You know, a faculty development program, industry development program is also required. And which Imaginum has been doing quite often for a long time, along with the other premier institutes like IIT Bombay, IISc, and many others all over the world. So, but many times the value creation is never understood properly. In the new whole list of confusion, what we have here, we have an addition, bioprinting also. Bioprinting has already added. So, so-called the so-called non-living feedstock to a living feedstock is also available now. Bio ink and bio, all that. Biocompatibility, bioimplantability, bioabsorbability, and so many things are being talked about. All of them have their own technology, their own material also. And that's where it is a kind of a maze. And while at one point you can look at it as an opportunity, on the other side, industry is also looking at with some kind of confusion. What is good for me? So many. So that's very important, as a challenge. Now, coming to as a practitioner, I can see clearly there are 6 reasons why industry would benefit from 3D printing. The part consolidation is one. You all know what is part consolidation. If I'm holding uh, a mug in my hand, it is just one part. It has got a stock number, bill of material one, and everything is one, right? But if I look at my watch, watch is made up of so many uh, things inside. It's got mechanisms. It has got so many moving parts. So many times that poses complexity in assembly, you know. So people are looking at additive manufacturing or 3D printing as a good way of combining things, you know. I'll give a simple example, a box which has got a Dakkan on the top and bottom, you have the container side. In order to hold them together and be able to open whenever I want, I can lock them whenever I want for protection. How many parts are required? Any guess how many parts are required? Take a wild guess. I'm not including that slide here, but I want to ask, if you take a box which is having a Dakkan on the top, bottom is the container, you know, and so it can be opened whenever you want and close it whenever you want and lock it also. So we are talking about something like a suitcase. So how many parts will be there in a suitcase? A trunk, for example, olden days trunk, metal trunk. How many parts will be there? You know, people have no idea. They say 5, 10, like that. There are 31 parts. Believe me, the 31 parts which are there. That includes the latches, the hinges, the pin, the fasteners which will hold it, and all that. So part consolidation is that capability by which I can do away with the fasteners, combine them together. And in some sense, it is also going to increase my reliability because the variable things are less. You're reducing the variability of things. So it becomes bill of material one, but what you see is an assembled part, which will open and close and you can secure it and all that, just like a trunk. So that's about a part consolidation. And then you have Jigsaw fixtures. Today, microelectronics is changing every day. So on demand, anything you want to do, this technology is going to be really useful and people are going for this. Need for light weighting is there mostly for the airborne system. For airborne systems like aeroplane, a drone, a rocket, spacecraft, modules. They all need lightweight because payload is to be maximized. That means the active contents have to go, the dead weight of the vehicle should come down. So
Hello.
I got myself muted
Yeah, it's okay,
by
sir.
touching the screen. Okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
So lightweighting, either one can go for a light material, like you have steel and aluminum, you can aluminum or titanium, you can go. There is another way of reducing it by having a complex structure, a lattice structure, things like that. And that is the capability 3D printing gives, additive manufacturing gives, you know. And looking at jewelry and things like that, which are highly complex, people were always doing by hand. Nothing to beat hand. You know. Handicrafts. You can do anything by hand. So the complexity, when you want to have done for one and many, having consistency, then again 3D printing and additive manufacturing comes to our rescue. And the jewelry industry particularly is taking it as a great technology, in order to combat the complexity variable. No matter what complexity, Imaginum has been producing some of the best most complicated things in the world. So much so that one of our creation got a Guinness Book of World Record. You know. So, and then of course, when the extreme agility is required to manufacture anything, suppose you want to make one of something, right? Need for one part, what it can be. It could be anything, one off, a wedding ring, one off, or it is somebody's implant, which is one off, or it could be a custom limited range something, a product, a designer product. Need for one part was never addressed by industry. It was a great challenge when it comes to, because fabrication shops were the early industrial revolution, or pre-industrial revolution avatars of industry. So if you want us to have a line system which is capable of making millions of parts, now if somebody wants one part, I cannot do that. You know, even Henry Ford said, I can offer you any color as long as it is black. So that is the beauty of mass production. There you can produce, but as long as the variables are all fixed, you can keep on doing it. The moment you ask for one and also become viable producing one, you also think of the economic order quantity. No, okay, somebody gives an order, they'll ask how many people, how many this thing, how many pieces you want. Economic order quantity is going to have a bearing on the price. But today, if you are having unity requirement, then again you're losing that bargain capacity. But a customer will again bargain. So how are you going to make it? So it's a challenge. Those areas, additive manufacturing is one and only technology which is going to come to our rescue. Need for customization, extreme customization. My spectacles, what I'm wearing, is of my power. It has to be made to me. I cannot, no matter you have a lens cot and everything, unless the power suits my needs, I will not be able to able to use it. So that is customization. Customization, in some sense, is a individualization, right? So such capability 3D printing gives. So as a practitioner of this for last 20, 25 years, I can confidently say these are the 6 reasons why industry and the world are after this technology. Moving forward, looking at it, people may ask, "Arey, then is it going to pose a problem? Will it be disrupting my current technologies?" Probably yes, probably no. Depends. You know, Wherever people were making by hand jewelry things, jewelry and all, it can be disrupted because they handle. And one karigar can make one, but I can make hundreds of it. Overnight, I can make. What used to take 10 days, it can make in overnight, it can make. That is the kind of disruption it is bringing in some areas. You know, Almost all hearing aids, thing is done by 3D printing today. Siemens or Johnson Johnson, you name it, they're all done by 3D printing only. And many of the dental things are made by 3D printing only. No milling and all are gone, right? And so some areas it is really good. That is the today's capability. But tomorrow's capabilities is to actually fill the entire landscape what you see here. There's a place for CNC, there's a place for investment casting and vacuum casting, and there is a place for injection molding and die casting, for example. Injection molding and die casting, they have the similar probably productivity and volume they can produce. So when we are looking at it, application area wise, industry should be conscious of this. Where to play. If I start converting something which is done by injection molding today by 3D printing, then they're making a mistake because it cannot create value. Anyway, we'll come back to this again when we talk of. And now coming to the challenges of this technology. there are a lot of technology barriers or perceived barriers were identified by Tim Menschel in a study. And some of these are materials and processes. You know, the moment you buy a 3D printer, you're kind of locked with that technology, that material. Correct, no? And not like imagining where you have a fleet of things. If you have a FTM, you have to stay put with FTM. You have spent a lot of money, so you have to derive benefit out of that. So then comes the learning curve. One has to understand the mission, run it, then attain quality, then kind of have a workflow which is done. Then whenever there is a need for different material, because the real world has different material. No, over the years we use so many material every day, starting from my toothpaste to night. If somebody wants to have a मच्छर का जो मैट होते हैं good night, we have so many material, from the early morning rise to the night sleep. We use in a day so many materials. So real world is full of materials. That is reality. And so we need to be able to use and make uh, these materials. So one technology means one few set of material, and how do I use any other? Well, I cannot use it. You know. So uh, we have a great constraint there. So when it comes to industry, they feel, okay, I need to be really careful now, because it cannot address everything. You know. So it is a challenge actually. And today, if you look at material, thankfully, it is a lot better, than during 2000 when I was running mission at Alma Mater IISc campus. I had just one material, ABS. Okay, one material, and of course that was a FDM Prodigy, and no other material. You know, whatever you want, you have only one material. Today, it is a lot better. You have liquid, we have laminates, we have filament, we have powder, alloys, dual material. People are looking at various things: clay, concrete, biocompatible things, living things by like bioink. They're all possible today. So in a way, this is getting addressed because a lot of research is going on in the material science for hunting. So that's a welcome, um, uh, sign, and that will continue. But even now, if I say the material consumption for additive manufacturing, it will be less than 1% compared to the rest of the material which will make this world, right? Notwithstanding somebody is building a bridge somewhere and all, it is less than 1% global, I'm telling. That means this technology has to really sprint forward, and capabilities. People have to make deep inroads into the application areas. And that's where industry, academia, OEMs should come closer to find application areas. One is like a T, they say, it is very broad on one side. It is also very deep if you go. We have to make deep inroads in many applications. Luckily, dentists and all, they were really very innovative. They absorbed, and it was giving value for them. That is the beauty of it. The adoption is done through whether the technology gives you value or not. That's very important. Looking at materials themselves, broadly you have polymers, uh, ceramics, and metals, and all in between these three. Polymers, composites. Composite with anything and everything is possible, right? Because it is additive, people are able to deposit material at a voxel level. you know and in the casting and all, it was different. You pour one alloy, the entire thing will be, then only you can eject it out. Whereas in additive manufacturing, I can have a control on every layer and depositing. You know, that gives you not only capabilities to imbibe a lot of new properties, different materials, conductive property, or even electronics, or making embedding a sensor inside. These are all possible because multi-material deposition is possible today. You know, in fact, the chip makers have always been doing it. We don't know about that world. It's a miniature world of chips, the VLSI, whatever they do, Intel and all. They have been doing additive manufacturing, but they're so micro level, wafers getting deposited and all that, P and the N material getting deposited, creating all sorts of electronics what you have. But when you're looking at the real world at a macro stage, the technologies will change. It's not going to be same. Design is yet another great challenge. It needs to be learned. People have 100 years of a kind of impedance of thinking. Thinking inertia they have. Why 100? It's 200 years. Correct? No. Thinking inertia. They know how to design things. For design for additive manufacturing is not learned. They apply the same rule what they have been applying so far. It is highly constrained, like design for manufacturing, design for assembly, design for that, design for this, designer for X. And so it is very constraining. But today, with the new capability to build things without any constraints, impossible objects, for example, those thinking have to go to the designers, and it should be supported by their bosses also. And that means it needs both bottom up and top down approach to attack and take care of the design of AM. AM skilled designers are very less. And again, here, industry, the practitioners, academia will play a great role in contributing to this. We all know, we say art to part, but how to convey it to people is also important. Conveying to different levels of people, people at the highest level and people at the grassroots level, how to tell them about the capabilities of 3D printing. And so a lot of these, things have to be again co-created in order to get a skilled manpower. That's very important. And if you look at the digital manufacturing, as a spectrum, many people think 3D printing, 3D printing, 3D printing. They forget about the other things. Industry, while it has got a great opportunity, they should be taught this. 3D printing needs, first of all, idea and design. It needs something called as a 3D content creator, a CAD. Then you require reverse engineering. You require design for additive manufacturing. After that, again, I cannot give it to 3D printer because I have to do some kind of a processing, pre-processing of the file, a file format, for example, its capability, for example. And then comes the mission. Then only, we are looking at 3D printer. Again, it has got material, it has got a care, because every material has its own different things required. If I want to do something in nylon, I may use a nitrogen bag, as a atmosphere. For metal, I may go for a vacuum, or I may go for inert gas as a atmosphere. Or in some cases, people are trying to do it in room temperature with the wire deposition and all are being done by simple Kuka robot. Just now, Professor Karunakaran and somebody were discussing. A Kuka robot is able to deposit wires, melted, drop on demand, kind of thing. They're able to deposit. So even after 3D printing also, you have a need for post-processing so much. And nothing will come to end up application without a post-processing. Only then we can think of a application world. In fact, as of the 3D content creation, I'm not here to pitch a sales pitch. This is not sales pitch. What I'm saying, in industry has these many, they're also confused. CAD for parametric design, CAD for digital sculpting, CAD for fun and makers are three different set. First one is the very serious stuff where the GD&T and all are very strictly followed, while the second one, people who mostly work are artists like sculptors, and the third one is all the enthusiastic hobbies, makers, the tinkerers, you know, um, uh, all of them. They don't want to pay for it. These are all free software. So you have a whole lot of stuff which are very important to actually create a 3D content. What can you think of producing without a 3D content? Nothing. Well, I think I'll go faster now. People might be feeling to you. But 3D content also requires file repair, slicing. Can we request somebody to? Hello? Can I request you to mute yourself?
आपका ये म्यूट करा.
Hello? Tell me when I can start. I can start. So for 3D content, we also require softwares which are going to help in file repair, slicing, support generation, file exchange, reduction of file. That means the portability is increased by having a zipping of file, incorporation of textures and all that, are possible through software. There are many of them, what you see, a few of them, but many. And in fact, with all these softwares, today we are able to optimize, design for a particular use context. We are just having a particular example here, but this is what happens. Industry is looking at a magic wand. In a way, it's an opportunity. It is also a constraint because they think, oh, it's fine. It can all be done. It is like you have a black box called topology optimization, or you have a generative design. You pass all the specification and you get the result. It doesn't work that way. And that's where industry is not able to adopt things because they don't want to go through this learning curve, of how this is done. And again, here, academic centers have a great role to play. They can do the co-creation. Many industries, they're mostly used to producing, and counting the production, counting the money. While academic institutions who are trying to learn, impart such skills, and also provide solution becomes a very important thing here. And this challenge which is there, which can be converted to a opportunity, and that's very important. In future, a lot of AI is going to be also be part of design, and that's where. But AI cannot identify what you need, So choosing what you want is something which is going to finally rest with the designer only. Okay. Well, the smartness is built into every part system in future by using a new design approach, maximize product performance through the synthesis of shapes, sizes, hierarchical structures, and material compositions, subject to capabilities of AM technologies. This is something like, a prophecy told by Ion Gibson, and others in a paper which I'm citing here. But it is today, it is all definitely possible with topology optimization and generative design and new material. It is possible to mix and match and get to many smart forms. And in fact, this smartness is built through part consolidation of assemblies and sub-assemblies, geometric freedom, and biomimicry, looking at nature for the best of designs. And the other area, which is going to be a big challenge and opportunity, is skill and education. Lack of appropriate skills, design, production, material, testing, all this. And this, because they don't have skill, it will prevent adoption. You know, so many people who have something knowledge of the product now today, they need to skill themselves, called upskilling, you know, in order to deliver what is required to the world. If Industry 4.0 is coming, let us get up and address that. Skill ourselves, upskill ourselves, in order to be employable or in order to create value. So again here, it becomes an important co-creation between industry, OEMs, and academia to address this lack of skills. It is going to be a great problem. Many times people come, we want to conduct a program. We'll say, yes, we'll conduct a program. Then they will next day they will ask, will these people, 100 people trying, will be taken into your employment? See, this is the problem today. Supposing you run a program, upskilling program on additive manufacturing, and charge a hefty amount, 2-3 lakhs, and those people who invest are ready to invest, but they'll ask, okay, where I will be placed now? Now, placing industries are not yet ready to take the manpower, the skilled manpower. That is a kind of miss between cup and lip. People are not able to, industry is not able to employ so many people. Though in Imaginary is 300 people, different, skill levels we have people, right? And they're all trained by us, because there is no one to train them, right? So this remains a great barrier for adoption. And as academicians and faculty, you should know about this. So here, creating opportunities, in the industry also is important. On one side, creating skilled manpower is one. The other side, how industry has to adopt it, how to create value. Everything is going to be driven by the value. And if you look at, people need to uh, post process, with various tools. I am not able to show every tool here. So people have, sandblasting required, short peening required, tumbling required, wire iridium required, CNC milling required, painting, pigmenting, laser marking, screen printing. So these are all post processing of the 3D printing thing, which has to go on. Again here, industry is not ready to look at it. They want to cross the bridge when the bridge comes. Let us cross the bridge when the bridge, river comes or whatever. That could be a big roadblock. Cost, investment, and financing. India has been a very, not only India, world over, when people want to spend money, they want to be careful. There's a return on investment on anything, net present value, and all those calculations they will do. So it is very important to empower the financial sector, to increase the awareness and how to adopt to the risk. Every business has its own risk, but they are familiar with the risk, what they are already knowing. They don't want to take additive manufacturing and go for yet another risk. Testing, scale up, machine purchase, depreciation, and how to compete with a smaller firm, for example. I know गली गली में अभी 3D printer लगा देते हैं. It's like a Xerox machine. So how do I, monetize my investment? And also they don't know, because they don't know the workflow. They don't know the way it is going to cost. Many times we say you adopt a activity based costing, ABC costing, for best for additive manufacturing, because there are so many activities, starting from design to pre-processing, 3D content, everywhere you have costs that are occurring. So activity-based costing becomes very important. I keep saying, don't look at the ROI, but look at the value creation. Why can't we think of 10x, 100x kind of value creation? Create the impossible. Create the impossible, so people will be ready to give you value for that. That's very important. So many times when we say value chain, again there are two types, two components of value chain. Supply chain comes and demand chain comes. What is supply chain? Purchasing, manufacturing, distribution on one side. Demand chain is marketing, sales, and services. They create demand. But you can see there is no user here. Because there is no user here, this is just an obsolete thing. The value chain has to become a demand chain. You know, there is a digital switch between the supply chain management to demand chain management. In demand chain, it is the end user, end customer who will actually trigger the whole process. You know. So you need to be very agile to address this. So this is something industry is not ready, they're not aware, there needs a lot of education here. The future is all about uh, addressing these complexities in geometries and in small batch quantity. In future, people don't require 1 million pieces. And this is done through new design thinking, customization, need for small batch, and even one part, optimization. Everywhere, material, the component, the performance, you know. In optimization, people are even looking at the complaint mechanisms, where the components are like spring and all are replaced by a one part, which has got fulcrum, which has got lever, which has got a hinge. So it delivers the same thing, value delivery. It is not about the product, it is about the experience of it, they say. Value delivery. How are you? People are ready to pay anything if there is a value delivery. One more thing which is coming in the way of adoption is standard regulation. There are two types. Perceived is a little stronger than the actual. Uh, the perceived or actual lack of standards for every sector, take aerospace, health, automotive, or any other lifestyle also. Today, people are, of course, trying to put SME, ST, ME, and various chapters are coming closer to work on it. And, so you can see here the kind of work that is going on. So they have made smaller groups and a lot of things are going on, starting from the terminology, design guidelines, data format, test methods, qualification guidance, test of artifacts, system performance, reliability, safety, inspection methods, etc. All of them are being thought of. Again, here there's an active involvement of OEMs, the technology users, industries, and academia. They're working close to define these. And these are also going to help us adopt. So large scale adoption can happen with such standardization. Not only creating them, but it is more important to understand them and apply them is very important. So there are few poster boys, I can say GE is one of them. This is one of the world's largest, more powerful jet engine ever produced. Correct, no? And this has a lot of benefits from AM. Part reduction, design freedom, time reduction, 10% more fuel efficient, and 300 plus parts to 7 parts. That is a capability, this is demonstrated. So these such demonstrations only will help in adoption. And probably people say, no, it's flying high. What is how I'm going to do this, which is on ground, which is in my hand now. So we need such poster boys kind of examples also. We need a down to earth example also. And that's where the challenge is. And many people, when we do optimize and help companies, we cannot share it in a form like this because it is all intellectual property, or we are bound by the confidentiality rules. NDAs are signed. So this is another thing why people are not able to design for such things, understand the capability. So there is a kind of a blockade of information, you know, uh, sharing best practices. So Bureau of Indian Standards in India has been working on this. There is a work group where they are trying to put up a kind of use case, use cases for validation and adoption. People are able to share it whichever is possible. Industries are also coming forward to share it. That is a really beauty of it. Measurement, inspection, and testing is yet another a huge area wherein we need to look at putting in competencies, which is lack of it is actually uh, um, impeding the adoption. That's very important. IP protection, secrecy, because today it's the internet age. One can, like a wildfire, you can share anything, information. So a person or a company has put in a lot of effort to make one system that can be shared instantaneously. At the speed of light, I can share it with somebody. You know, that means people are looking at how can I protect it, because it has a lot of money. It has got business, risk if we kind of copy copyable, making it available for public domain, things like that. So for that also, the technologies are coming today. So a lot of technologies like this too. There are many. Well, I mean, we are not we are aware of these, but we need to still test them. File protection, limited edition object, file tracking, file licensing. They have the capability to empower a file with a data, metadata, is given, in a new format. And so that new format will help it encrypt, protect it, it expires, or it can trace where it is now. A design can be, stored as a digital inventory, and people can buy it online by paying. So every download, after one download, it will expire. They can authorize it for metals, for example. They can authorize it for only plastic. They can authorize it to use only one time, or they can say you can use one time for 1 year, anytime. 1 year. After 1 year, it expires, or they can authorize for 100 only. Such capability is possible, and they can also know the trace. If it goes in a wrong place, they can even stop it, lock it. Such capabilities are getting built in the file also. This is one more reason why industry is little hesitant to absorb, the technology. They want to know, okay, everything is there, then everything foolproof, no risk, then they will go for it. Well, in all this scenario, you can see a lot of missions, all missions are there, the small and big and micro and to mega. Uh, People are also looking at what is known as a cloud factory. In fact, Imaginarium started its journey, cloud factory in 16. By 18, we had already established. When pandemic took over the world, when they had to shut down everything, we were still happy to process files and print for the world, thanks to our own cloud factory. And today it is up and running along with our normal thing. So a kind of hybrid thing. People can also reach us by email and all, but a lot of people can directly give it to the um, quotation robot, which will take the file, which will process, will give you a quotation, things like that. Today it's possible, and many times individual designer, maker, artist can also produce something without a factory. So a lot of factoryless, inventoryless, enterprises we have been able to support. And applications, of course, they provide a lot of promise. Looking at future, for some time, I will show you some applications very rapidly now. These are rapid prototypes. Prototypes are always there, will be used, and you can see some of the metal is best used as a heat exchanger, and plastics and jewelry, and a new aesthetics. You can see the capability of 3D printing. These are all assembled at the time of printing itself. And on right hand side, we have pigmented it, a white color. And so you have many complex things can be made. These are all businesses we have been supporting, brands we are supporting. And you can see here a combination of plastic and gold, and using primitives, and how these plastics are many things, IoTs, medical, a big opportunity. There's a blind braille trainer, Annie, and this is a hypothermia device for infants, infant mortality, and all. We can the breast examiner, eye breast exam. It was done. It's a health band, and so not only just that, we can also do it for animals, pets, body parts. Of course, in human orthopedics and all, we do a lot of work. And you can see additive manufacturing brings the physical side of the cyber physical system in the whole scheme of Industry 4.0. I think with this, we are almost trying to end. Design will lead the consumption. Manufacturing will be taken for granted in future. Future of 3D printing is moving beyond prototyping to parts for end use. You can see some of these are end use applications. World's first AI powered finger ring, which was made in Imaginarium. And you can see on the right hand side, there's a display going on the finger ring. So one can take a phone, one can authorize a cash transfer, etc. Those are possible. And you may have a fun. What is this? This is a complement mechanism. A compliant mechanism is something which is really smart, because it's a bill of material of one with the impingement of pneumatic pressure. The tongue works, and it's a end actuator, pick and place robot. And people are also looking at going for a mass customization, which is a big topic by itself. And so the future will be made through accessible, reliable technology, acceptable quality, material for real world, controllable systems. Because in Industry 4.0, everything is controllable and predictable results. You are able to do a in situ monitoring and all. We can predict the results, whether I get a good sound part or not. I think with this, I come to the end of the presentation. I don't know how it went. I did not touch upon the technologies, but I was looking at the challenges and opportunity of industry, what we have. We have been enabling industry through various offerings what we have, be it in engineering, aerospace, automotive, jewelry, healthcare, solutions in hardware, software, or the learning of this to industry, venture funding. All these are spurring the industry. And you're most welcome to ask me a few questions if you have time. I'll stop at this stage.
Thank you,
I'd
sir.
like to take your.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thanks for this nice session, nice presentation. So, any questions from the audience? You can unmute yourself and you can ask the questions directly to the speaker.
It was offbeat, you know. It was not all about graphs. That's what an industry person can talk.
Yes, sir. I have two questions.
Yeah.
One, you have discussed about the lifetime in the beginning of your presentation for a component, as well as I would like to ask you the percentage of the mechanical properties, the components made by the 3D printing, as well as its lifetime.
Okay. So according to me, it all depends on the context of use. It has to give you the same life and same kind of no. There is no discount that can be given. No, don't give any discount. It is either suitable to a use or it is not suitable to a use. Because we are real people. How can I say when G parts, some people may die when it is airborne, and some people will live and some people will die. I cannot say that. So it has to withstand the real requirements of a work context, service context. Suppose I can say a bottle I make by 3D printing. Okay, it can withstand this liquid for 1 week. After 1 week, you have to consume. Otherwise, it will start going out. Not acceptable. No,
Yeah.
not acceptable. So, I will say 3D printing is a new way of making things, but no other rebate it can be given. It is not to be given any kind of rebate. You know, it has to be used and tested under the same stringent conditions as you do for any conventional material. A hook is there. How can I say hook can have less strength because it is 3D printed? It has to withstand, otherwise there will be a catastrophe. There will be But one thing is there. Whenever I talk about this, in design, there are two approaches: safe fail and fail
Fail
safe.
safe. Yes.
Safe fail is always good. Earlier days, people used to have a factor of safety, a factor of ignorance, keeping a lot of things. It'll survive for how long? Maybe 1,000 years, 2,000 years, 3,000 years. Now, life cycle is only 1 year. You know, for car 3 years life cycle. Why you want to make it last for 1,000 years? That is a new thinking. So they say, if at all it fails, let it fail safely. That has been the approach, and that is being ably supported by the software. Today, the simulation, finite elements, now it has become infinite elements because of the computing power. The finite element has become infinite elements. They're able to ascertain the capability of material by simulations, the four flow patterns. And I think that is going to drive. Yeah.
Then what about the economy? If, as you said, if it is not going to be.
Economics is something which is going to come during the course of time. Right now, today, if I ask, if some steel is about, you take steel 45 kilo, 40 scrap is 30 rupees per kilo. And if I buy it from a store is 45 rupees. And the powder stock, feed stock is 4,500 rupees per kilo. But very smartly, people are thinking, whenever there is a roadblock, people know very carefully circumvent it, you know. And the Columbus and, the whatever you have, all these people are always around, they will try to find a new way, new route, right, to all this, circumvent. One of the new route would be instead of feedstock powder, use directly metal wire. And it is a very smart way, and they put it on a KUKA robot or something like that, and they're able to deposit out of the box 3D printing. That is the future in future. The box 3D printers will go away. That becomes a thing of past. If we can print at room temperature, using wires with a small umbrella of inert gas to protect the oxidation and all, so that you don't have structural properties change, the microstructure and all. People are looking at so many aspects, and I think that is the way forward. And wires can actually disrupt. The wire deposition rates could be very high. I have collected something, but I have not. This is not focused to metal additive, so I am not interpreting those. But a lot of good. There is something called a technology wherein they deposit metal by a vector. Just like a 3D doodler. It goes to 000. It starts the origin. It goes to some point in space, and it is just like it is soft, it goes, it just sets there and it moves. No support is required. Metal additive, one of the problem is lot of support required. Support for stability, support for sticking to the substratum, support for heat scavenging, so many reasons supports are required, and removing them is a big headache. And what is the fun, having additive advantage and having a disadvantage to again mission them, and then go for a hybrid. Hybrid means sometimes you need to even have fixtures. 3D printing, you're able to do toolless because it doesn't require any fixture. I don't require a rotary table. I can go from circle to a square to a hexagon. Seamlessly, I can go. The G code will support it. No change. But indexing and all, if I want to do a milling in hybrid, I need indexing for that. Of course, I can also put it on a robotic arm. That is possibility. Things will change, I think. We are in a wonderful time. It's best time to be alive because a lot of new things are going to come in another 5-10 years. The whole of manufacturing will be disrupted with partnership with additive and subtractive, robot and human beings, technology and skill, design and AI. They're all going to get intertwined. And so people are also going to morph from reality to virtual reality, in every day, every minute, so a lot of things are going to change.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Any questions from the participants? Madam.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your enhanced elaboration about the different companies in picture for the 3D printing, the tandem printing method, what you explained, and the cases, the product life cycle, everything, whatever you have explained is very well elaborative and enlightened us, ourselves and our participants. Thank you so much. A small interruption happened in the starting of your program with your introduction, as the student has left the internet connectivity. So I would like to take the privilege and just brief within 2 minutes your profile, sir. So Dr. Guru Prasad Rao is a director and mentor, leadership team at Imaginarium India Private Limited, India's leading 3D printing company. His current focus is on DFAM for metal 3D printing medical applications, skill development, besides technology mentoring and partnerships across domains. Dr. Rao is a technocrat with over 30 years of experience encompassing industry and academia. He holds BE Mechanical with PG in Tool Engineering from GTTC and Machine Design in Product Design from IISc Bangalore and PhD from IIT Bombay. For his terminal degree, he worked on medical applications of 3D printing. His industrial assignments include Titan, Tanishq, Crompton Greaves, and presently at Imaginarium. He joined Imaginarium as CEO and is presently designated as Mentor Director. He has taught design at IISc, NIFT, JSS, ATE, and NTTF. He was professor and head project office IICD Jaipur. He also teaches courses on emerging technology and its impact at SPJIMR and KJ Somya Business Schools. He is also a mentor at KIIT TBI Bhubaneswar and guides startups. Dr. Rao is associated with many industry bodies such as CAI, FICCI, NASCOM, BIS, IAMF, Atal Innovation Mission. Presently is a part of member CAI National Committee on Design from the year 2019 to 2021. As CAI Conference Chairman, he successfully led CAI 3D Printing Conference 2019 at Mumbai as Conference Chairman. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
My pleasure.
I heartily thanking to Dr. Guru Prasad Rao, sir, for accepting our invitation to deliver a lecture in our faculty development program. Thanking you, sir. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. The next session will be start from 2 o'clock. Okay, please, all of you join at the 2 o'clock. Okay, now the lunch break. Thank you. Thanking you to all. Thanking you to participants.